Now, let's look at adrenaline. Now, adrenaline is, of course, produced by the adrenal gland. Remember, we have two sets of adrenal gland. And if you look at the adrenal gland, it is divided into two regions. That is the medulla region, which is yellow in color, and the outer section, which is white in color, which is referred to as the cortex. Now, the medulla region secretes the hormone, two hormones, that is adrenaline and noradrenaline. Remember, the two hormones are mostly produced during emergencies. They are produced during emergencies, and that's why we call, for example, adrenaline a flight and fight hormone, because it prepares the body for purposes of taking up emergencies that have occurred. For example, to raise the level at which the blood flows to muscles for contraction. Now, on this end, you'll be able to see the relationship between the adrenal gland and then the kidney. As we said earlier, that the two glands are located on both sides of the kidney, just above them. Now, what are the roles of adrenaline? Number one, under normal situation, it's supposed to accelerate the heart rate. Then also increases the rate of breathing. That means that you'll be able to take up more oxygen, and this oxygen will be taken to respiring tissues or muscles for purposes of energy production. Then increases blood sugar level. Of course, you know, this is the base of energy in the body. Then increases blood flow to muscles for muscular contraction, and then hastening blood clotting. This is very important, especially as one may succumb to some injuries during the process of escaping maybe an injurious situation. Then dilating air passages, for example, the trachea. Dilating air passages, for example, the trachea. Those are some of the influence of adrenaline when it is produced in sufficient amount. Now, those roles or those activities of adrenaline can be summarized in this diagram here. Check in the center here, we have adrenaline. What are some of the effects? For example, here it is stating that it is produced by the adrenal medulla. Remember, apart from adrenaline, this medulla also secretes noradrenaline hormone. Now, this hormone, once produced, it enhances or increases what you call mental alertness. So one becomes sharp at that point where there is an emergency. Then another influence is dilation of the pupil. That is dilation of the pupil. And then it stimulates the conversion of glycogen to glucose. Of course, this one is to provide additional energy that is needed during emergency, for example, for muscles to contract. Then it lowers intestinal motility. This one, remember, peristalsis. That means that adrenaline, if produced, it has a negative influence or impact on peristalsis. Remember, peristalsis is the wave of muscular contraction in the stomach region. Remember the two muscles, that is the circular and the radial muscles. Once they contract, they push the bolus down the tract. Therefore, if adrenaline is secreted, it lowers intestinal motility. Then increases the oxidation of fats. So as to provide more energy that would be required during the emergencies. To the muscles, it enhances the contraction. Therefore, it brings about what we call muscle contraction efficiencies. And then the last one is increasing the cardiac output. Remember, this is the volume of the blood that is getting out of the heart per unit time. So that volume will be increased under the influence of adrenaline. So if you look at this, all in all, you realize that all these activities are prepared to ensure that the body is prepared for emergencies. And that's why we take it that adrenaline is responsible for fight and flight. Now, sometimes the activity of the adrenal medulla may be affected, and this could lead to either under-secretion or over-secretion of the adrenaline. So what would be the effect if there is excessive production of adrenaline? One of, not excessive really, but low production of adrenaline. One of the effects could be low blood pressure, inability to withstand stress, unnecessary fatigue, muscle weakness, amongst others. Whereas if adrenaline is produced in very high amount than necessary, this could lead to symptoms such as high blood pressure, severe headache, sweating, and then feeling of faintness, and of course premature aging of major body organs, for example the heart, because they are likely to be overworked, amongst other symptoms. Please look through these symptoms and pay attention to them. I've just quickly gone through them because of issues to do with the time. Now, the other gland is the pineal gland. This one you'll read through the notes that we shall accompany to the video. Therefore, understand that this is a very important gland because it produces or secretes melatonin, and this is one of the hormones that we said earlier regulates the wake and sleep cycle, and apart from that it also controls the onset of puberty. So it is a very, very important hormone to animals, especially human beings. So this is the location. We said it's just in the forebrain and beneath the cerebrum. Now, here is a summary. I'll expect you to look through the summary of the gland, the 8 of them, their location, the location, and then the hormone they produce, and of course one of the functions of each of the hormone that is produced. So go through this summary for purposes of emphasizing on what you're supposed to understand. Now let me complete this session by looking at the differences between the nervous system and the endocrine system. Now then, we have discussed the two of them. So in nervous system, the transmission is electrical and a chemical. Remember, we said along the axon of the nerve cell, the transmission is electrical because it involves sodium ions, potassium ions, and don't forget about the chloride ions. But across the synapse, the transmission is chemical because it involves the production of acetylcholine that makes the adjacent postsynaptic membrane permeable to the passage of the sodium ions in what we call the action potential. And then in the endocrine system, the transmission is chemical only because it involves hormones, and we said hormones are organic chemical substances that are produced and then they are used elsewhere. Then number 2, impulses travel along a nerve fiber, and therefore it is specific. It has a specific pathway. But in endocrine system, the chemicals transported through bloodstream, and therefore the pathway is not specific because remember, the bloodstream passes across all parts of the body. And then number 3, there is a rapid transmission, hence quick response. So the transmission is fast, within milliseconds, within nanoseconds. But in endocrine system, the transmission is low, and therefore the response is as well low. Next one is that the effects are short-lived for the nervous system. Effects are short-lived. Remember what we call the reflex actions. But in the endocrine system, the effects are long lasting. The effects are long lasting. Look at the changes in secondary behaviors of boys and girls. You'll be able to note that the effects here are long lasting. Then the response affects specific and localized part of the body, but in endocrine system, the responses affects several parts of the body. Finally, in nervous system, the response is involuntary, but in the endocrine system, the response is both voluntary and involuntary. That means that there is a part of the brain that is involved. At the same time, sometimes the response does not involve any coordination by the brain. So those are the salient differences between the nervous system and endocrine system. Again, go through them and understand each of them.